everybody. Today is Tuesday, May the 6th. This is our Budget and Finance Committee meeting. I'm Christine Novello. I'm a governing board director, the association treasurer, and the chairperson of today's meeting. Before we call this meeting, we will call this meeting to order today. And please rise if you can. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Once again, Christine Novello. I'm the chairperson of the meeting, a governing board director, and the association treasurer. We have all members of the Budget and Finance Committee in attendance today, so we have established quorum. If you'd like to meet the members of the Budget and Finance Committee, you can go back to the YouTube recording of our first meeting on September 3rd, at which time every member introduced themselves and went into more detail. So again, you're welcome to go back to that. If this is your first time with us, again, welcome. I'll read some very quick meeting procedures before we get started. The governing board and its committees conduct all their meetings in compliance with Arizona Planned Community Association open meeting laws per ARS 33-1804 and in concert with RCSCW bylaws, policies, and standing rules. Parliamentary procedures as outlined in the most recent edition of Robert's Rules of Order will be followed in all meetings as appropriate, consistent with Bylaw 3.07, procedures for owner-member meetings, and standing rules number 2 and number 3. So that being said, we're through all our items of number 1. We'll turn to our meeting minutes from our last meeting, April 15th. Committee, did you see any concerns or any changes that are necessary? Okay, seeing none, we have consensus to approve those minutes. And we'll move on to new business. We're looking at the policy FI-12. We've already recommended, we reviewed this in detail on April 15th, and we recommended moving forward. What I did want you all to see on the committee, we did make some changes in the room, some verbal changes, so just wanted you to see how those actually looked on paper. And one of the pieces of feedback from a couple of our board members was to actually go forward and make some of the numbering changes that we also wanted to make. So you'll see in front of you those changes. No changes to the text itself. Some of the numbering has changed, and that's highlighted in yellow. And you'll see under section 3.1, we did make that change verbally in the room to move the definition to the front of the sentence. So that's the sum and total of what we're looking at here. Are there any concerns with those changes? Okay, so just quick consensus that the recommendation to move this forward to the governing board still stands. Any objections? Excellent. So that's 3.01. Thank you so much. The governing board has the FI-12 review on its agenda for this upcoming Friday. So now moving on to 3.02, our operating budget. Cliff, have there been any changes?
The only change since our last meeting is that the website redesign that was in the capital budget was not voted to move forward in the budget. So that's reflected in the modeling because that was a new capital item. So it changed our fully funded balance percentage by 1 point in the current year, but no impact anywhere else because it was not a reserve study item. But that's the only change.
So no changes to the operating budget for us to consider either, correct?
No changes.
Excellent. So for, I know at least 2, maybe 3 of you were in the room physically when the governing board reviewed the capital budget, but this committee had recommended that the governing board pull that out, and they did in the end remove, I should say we, as a governing board, decided to remove that capital budget item entirely, as Cliff just mentioned. It's not to say that the concept has gone away. To the contrary, we directed, as a board, directed the general manager to move forward and to create scope and to specify that in an RFP. So the governing board will reconsider that item as soon as the scope items in the RFP are available. It will not necessarily have to wait until the next budget cycle. Just a quick recap.
Yes, but the funds for that project are currently not available in the budget. So we'd have to find funds either through savings on the capital spend next year or through allowance funds. Again, the prudent thing would be to wait probably till March, April of the following year, because you really don't know where you're at on savings or allowance funds. So, at that point in time, we probably put it in the 26, 27 operating budget. But certainly proceeding with the scope of work, proceeding with potential vendors, RFP, all that would be definitely happening.
It's something, I thank you for the specification. Just wanted to advise the rest of the committee, if you missed it, that was the intention, to understand the scope better. I think it's something that the committee had recommended as well, not necessarily to remove it from the budget, but the committee recommended understanding the scope better. So that was the decision. Any questions or discussion on operating budget or that capital item from the committee? Okay, just to recap as well for the folks who are attending today, this committee recommended moving forward to the governing board the operating budget as proposed without making any changes. So the committee recommended that. I will advise the governing board of that again at our workshop on Friday. At that workshop, we will be discussing the operating budget in detail. Okay, moving on to 3.03. At our last meeting, we reminded ourselves that we've reviewed, now that we're moving forward, we've moved forward with a recommendation on FY12. That, of course, completes our policy reviews for the year. We focused on on making changes to policies that were of substance, and we, if you will, put aside some of the concerns that we had as a committee on consistency of format and so forth. I believe that's what this, we were recapping for us, the fact that we do want to have some kind of a discussion, consider a recommendation on this as a committee. Am I summarizing our thoughts correctly? What I'm going to propose then, we've talked about this a lot or mentioned it at times during the year. A few of you have looked at some, if you will, other practices, best practices. I'm specifically familiar with David Perot has put some time and effort into looking at what are some possible formats and so forth. So I recommend to us as a committee that we put this on our agenda, this discussion on our agenda for the first meeting in June. And that will give us enough time to hear some of what David's done and also give us time, if there are other members of the committee who want to sort of participate in that discussion, to formulate a little bit more of a best practices view. We can gather our thoughts together and come together and put it on the agenda the first meeting in June. How does that sound? Okay, so we'll put that policy, if you will, the recommendation, and the recommendation isn't so much, most of the time we make recommendations as a committee that goes to the governing board. This would be, if we make a recommendation as a committee, we'll talk about that and any other improvements that we want to consider and forward that to the incoming fiscal year 25-26 Budget and Finance Committee for their consideration. We're just cruising today. 3.04. Speaking of June meetings, We have, in addition to today, we have 3 more meetings on the schedule. Several of your counterpart committees have already wrapped up their work for the year. The good news is that, or bad news, if you will, we're going to be together until June because we still have a budget discussion that's open at the governing board. Should the governing board entertain some additional changes, or there be any changes before the governing board takes its vote at the end of May, Budget and Finance will consider all that. We also have a few other items that we need to look at, our insurance renewal and so forth. So we are continuing to meet until June, and that's my expectation. So I know that several of you have expressed to me that you're on your way back to your cooler weather homes, but just let me know that you need remote access and we'll set that up for you. Are there any concerns about our meeting schedule or any other items that you guys wanted to cover during the upcoming budget and finance meetings in the next few sessions? All right. 3.05. For those of you who are here, those of you on the committee, I personally hope that you'll you'll want to continue to serve our community, but it's entirely volunteer. If you do wish to serve on this committee or any committee, you need to reapply. Members of the committee need to know that. There is a link. I sent it to you in email. For those of you who are here, fellow residents and owner members, all owner members are welcome to serve. That application is available on the suncitywest.com website, and you get to it by navigating to the governing board page. So if you have any trouble with that, shoot me an email, christine.novello@suncitywest.com. I'm happy to give you the direct link, but it's really all over Sun City West's social media and so forth. So we encourage you to apply and continue to serve our beautiful community. I believe I've already mentioned to the members of the committee, but if you're not aware, I will not be the treasurer starting in July 1st. The new governing board has elected Ann Becknell to serve as our treasurer for the next fiscal year. So all the chair people choose their own committee members, but I wish you all the very best. And I do hope that you'll elect to want to serve again. You've done a fantastic job this year. There's no obligation, and you're all new to this. So again, I hope that you'll reapply. Any questions from committee members or audience on, I didn't ask the audience for questions on any of our new business, so I'll open that now to the floor for this or any other item. So we do have a resident who's coming to the microphone, and I ask the same for our online attendees. You're hearing this about 30 seconds behind what's happening live in the room. So if you do have any questions, please enter them in. And although I personally know who you are, please introduce yourself and rec card number.
Good morning. Bruce Lees, 135422. I'm happy to represent membership owners of the community. There were few and far between in attendance here. Hopefully there's more online. I'll have a brief thing to read, and then I'll ask for some feedback, please. Thank you. So on April 17th, 2025, the Sun City West Governing Board voted unanimously to strip $300,000 from the FY 25-26 annual budget until staff complied with the directives from the board to present certain facts, scope of work, and RFPs, which I also advocated for. As a result of that funding decision, I proposed to the Budget and Finance Committee and ultimately to the Governing Board a recommendation to lower the proposed membership dues fee increase from 4.9%, $598, down to 3.5%, $590, based on the fact that the reduction in dues increase would result in a revenue difference of approximately $218,912 to the budget. which could be realized by not having that $300,000 budget line item included in the budget. The reduced fees increase would be more in line with the 3.5 fee increase for golf fees, the 3.6 fee increase in APFs, and more in line with the overall projected total revenue target gain of 3.9%. If we can increase the gain of interest income over the proposed $100,000 loss of interest income, my proposed membership fee reduction is reasonable and prudent. Second item, I would appreciate if someone could explain.
Hold on, just one moment, Mr. Lees. Committee, are we okay with allowing Mr. Lees to continue with his statement? Very well, you may continue. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you
sir.
very much. I didn't realize I was taking 2 minutes. This will be short. I would ask if someone could explain why we are projecting a $100,000 loss in interest income when we have a means to take some operating capital and invest in short-term CDs or high-yield savings accounts while interest rates are currently available are a good way to gain revenue in the short term. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Lee. So 2 separate items. We'll talk first about the, your proposal. Well, let's talk first about the, that second question. I think that'll be easier to answer. Cliff, could you take that one first, please?
Yes, that's a good question. The interest income on the operating cash is managed on the short term, of course. And with the capital outlay that we're going to have between the irrigation projects and the timing of when we're going to be spending that cash, we don't have the luxury of investing that operating cash, as much operating cash as we did this year. So, for example, the approximately $5.5 million irrigation project actually just started. So we had the luxury of being able to use the operating funds in the way of being able to invest those that we had partitioned for that project this whole year, which gave us, it's actually gonna bear around a little over $300,000 for us this year. But unfortunately, we won't have that luxury next year because those funds will be spent on the projects. Now, with us truing up the reserve fund the following December, call it, or November, December, the funds that will eventually pay for those projects are in the reserve fund, gaining interest and dividends and things like that. They're just not in short-term treasuries in our operating account. So the funds will be generated in the reserve fund versus in the operating fund, but ultimately everything ends up in the reserve fund at the end of the day. So, and it's a little complicated, but that's why there's a decrease in that, because we're not going to have as much free cash in our operating account for interest income.
That's the short answer. Thanks.
Yes.
I hope that one answered that. I hope that answered that part of the question. But the bigger question was your proposal. And again, I'm going to defer to Cliff for the details, but just to remind us, we're talking a couple of different things here. They are interrelated, and I know that you're aware of this, Mr. Lees, but when we're talking about capital expenditure, which is really what we deferred in the governing board, right? We're talking about deferring a capital expenditure. That's not something that we generally fund directly and immediately, right? We do that from our reserve fund.
Yeah, so all capital in new or this would have been a new project, but and reserve study items, all of that's paid for out of the reserve fund. So it does not impact operations.
And therefore, it doesn't directly impact our
dues.
Our dues.
Yes.
So when we have additional monies, as we do each year, that we put into the budget that you've seen, the next year the proposal is that we're expecting 7.5% of that revenue would be reinvested ultimately in our reserve fund. But we do that as a way of bolstering the reserve fund. It's not directly as a result. Right? So when we see a reduction in the capital, we're not going to see a corresponding reduction in the way that you proposed. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's accurate. I would say before we had the policy of calling out so to speak, that's 7.5%, we always budgeted excess to go into the reserve fund. So that's always been
always
part of
been
the
there.
budget. 2 years ago, what the governing board decided after many discussions and what the B&F committee ended up recommending was that instead of budgeting for an excess, that we actually call that out because we know that we need funds from operations to help feed our reserve fund because APFs cannot pay for everything. So we decided at that point in time, the board made the recommendation, hey, let's call that out every month because there was this perception that we had profit and we're a nonprofit, so we should be budgeting for profit, even though it was really excess we were budgeting for to go into the reserve fund. So that's why we made that change, and I think it's been a good change. I really do. It calls it out in the budgeting process. It makes it clear that, look, we do need funds from our dues and fees ultimately to go into our reserve fund because we cannot support it with APF fees alone and investment income.
At least not without some other ways of bolstering our income, things that none of us would prefer to see, things like a special assessment in a large year and so forth, right? So this is a way, when I say this is a way that over time, the association and the governing board have collaborated to keep our budgeting under control so that we can be looking ahead. We're also looking at a way to keep some of these increases without wide variations, because if you had showed some of these slides, and they're in our budget packet, I know. Without this, and in the past, before we had our current staff, we had some really wide variations in terms of the amount, the percentage that we would see increases over time. And although it feels good in the short run to have very small dues increases in a particular year, we've seen in our very recent past, because our governing board did decide to hold fees, our recreation center fees were held flat coming out of the COVID 2020 year, right? And we saw the impact of that. And again, happy to walk you through that. Cliff's done a great job. We can give you some of the specifics. You can look at some of this on past presentations, or we can answer that for anybody who may be interested to see. You can look in our past few years and see what had happened and the fact that we do have to make some of that up over time. So, Mr. Lees, back to you.
Yes, if I may. Am I still on? Okay, great. I get kind of wrapped around the axle. The consideration is that any leftover operating expense money that's derived from membership and APFs is used at the end of the year, deposited into the reserve fund. Is that a correct statement?
The APF fees always go in.
Yes,
right?
but
and then the excess.
remainder of the operating expense capital
Yes.
to the tune, I think last year was $1.13 million went into the reserve fund from operating expenses.
No, it was an additional approximately 800,000 that was excess over budget that went into the reserve fund calculation. Yes.
Okay, and the 7.5% goal is not a hard number. In other words, there's nothing in policy that says 7.5% of operating or excess operating expense needs to be placed into the reserve fund?
That's correct. That number is not in policy.
Okay, so when you made a statement saying that the reserve study, that the funds, the 300,000 that was stripped out of the proposed budget didn't actually come from operating expenses, it came from the reserve fund, I don't think that's a real accurate statement, or I may be not understanding it correctly, because the membership is paying the money. That is an operating expense revenue stream, so it's directly impacted by membership dues. I understood in the discussion that you alluded to the fact that it is not. So am I misunderstanding something?
Again, I think Cliff will explain it better, but you may have misunderstood, or I misstated, right? anything that's capital,
Mhm.
capital expenditures are, they will come from our reserve fund. Right, so it doesn't come from next year's dues directly. Now, yes, we
Yes, I
have
understand.
we have a part of the dues that feed the reserve fund over time. That is correct. Am I still on point, Cliff, or can you?
Absolutely, you're doing a good job.
It's that education and the mind is still there. But yes,
So,
please go in.
Essentially, there's two separate budgets.
Mhm.
Okay, that's why I don't know if you remember seeing the wheel with all the services, and
Oh,
then on
yes.
the left-hand side operating, right-hand side capital. So there's two separate budgets. In the modeling, we have to feed the reserve fund with funds from operations.
Mhm.
Okay, so that, yes, that does help feed the reserve fund, but when we pay for our capital improvement budget, it comes from that reserve fund. And so that's the best way that I can explain it. So when you make a change in the capital improvement budget, you are making a change in the reserve fund cash outlay, so to speak. So those funds do stay in there if you don't spend that money, which ultimately impacts the modeling down the road and your planning. But at the end of the day, if you take $100,000 out of an operating budget and in terms of dues, well, that's $100,000 per year till infinity that you don't have, and that's going to impact dues increases down the road.
Mhm.
It will impact it because you have to model that and you have to get there somehow. So the idea is to create a budget, and we feel like we've done this. And if everybody walks away unhappy, we've definitely done our job, because again, we've talked about this, that where we have people in this community that want restaurants and they want covered pickleball, air conditioned lawn bowling, and all these things, and they're like, hey, I'll pay for it. All right, but we're not gonna put that in a budget. So we try and create the budget that we can best for everybody. We feel like this budget does that. We really do. We really do feel like it.
And I'm not disagreeing with the overall philosophy and how we attain that. I'm looking for a means to possibly take a closer look does the increase necessarily have to be at the recommended proposal?
Right.
Um,
And I'm sorry
I
to
may.
interrupt you. We've been looking at this since, I want to say January. February was our first look, right? So the committee has, we pulled apart every single line item over the course of the past few months. We looked really closely at all of those. And those are the items that impact directly the dues and the amount of dues that we have to raise each year. So we looked and pulled apart every single item as a committee. And after that, we all came to the conclusion that, again, I don't recall that anybody was happy and jumping for joy, to Cliff's point, but we were satisfied that we had done everything that we could, and we could not find any substantial impacts beyond what we had questioned.
Thank you. So it's the consensus of the Budget and Finance Committee and the recommendation to the board that the 4.9 increase remain.
That's what we had just, yes, that is my take of the consensus we had a few moments ago, that we didn't make any changes. Can't say that, again, to summarize, and please, committee, you can tell me if I'm incorrect. When we went through this in detail a few meetings ago, we looked at this and none of the committee members were happy, but we were satisfied that we had done everything that we could. I think that was the words that we chose at the time. Right.
Correct. And that was before the decision by the board was made to strip out that additional.
Right, and this is
line item.
the operating budget.
Correct.
Right? Again, two
correct,
separate
but the money
discussions.
also initially comes from the single source membership, APFs, that funds basically everything in golf revenue and such. So I'm well aware of that. It's semantics. Hey, thank you very much for your cooperation.
And we welcome your questions. Jim, you had a point?
Yeah, you poked on something that kind of got my attention. So if everything was modeled and everything was budgeted at our proposed increases, and then we pulled out the 300 grand, and then you kind of made a comment about that if the rec center comes back with their due diligence and an action plan, that those funds are looking to be allocated in March, April. What happened to that 300 grand that everybody, if those dues increases go?
Okay, so the 300 grand is in the reserve fund, it's in that budget, okay? So the capital improvement budget. The funds just stay in the reserve fund. Now, that does impact your balance in your reserve fund, which will impact your fully funded balance percentage. So we make moves all the time in the reserve study that impact the fully funded balance in the reserve fund on a daily basis. When we model that out, that's just a point in time, but there's changes that are made all the time in that. So when we put together the operating budget, we don't make decisions based on movements that are done within the reserve fund and the reserve study and whether we decide to do new capital. We model out 1.4 million a year in new capital in that modeling. If we don't spend it, it impacts the reserve fund balance, and when we go to remodel, then we assess the health of that balance at that time.
So that, I guess I'm still stuck on that. 300 grand is budgeted in.
Still in the reserve,
It's still in the reserve fund.
Yeah.
to be used later on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just clarify just a little bit? So if you think about this, one is a one-year budget and one is a third-year budget.
Right.
Okay, so one is what we are looking at to spend on operations in a single fiscal year.
Right.
The second budget takes into account what we spend on maintaining the totality of our assets.
Yep, I understand that.
Okay, so when you look at it that way, and that 300,000 was not, they decided to pull it out for this year. They did not decide to pull it out completely and never spend it. What they said was, we actually really are going to need more information. We want it to be laid out better. And so in many respects, what we're really talking about is a deferral of that amount. So the deferral of that amount is still sitting in.
Yes.
Okay, the deferral of that amount,
Yes.
that 300,000 is still sitting in the reserve fund where it belongs to be utilized in the future for funding of that type of project, something similar. And again, it's 300,000, which that move of 300,000 can be made almost daily in our estimate of what the reserve fund is, because things change. We pull things forward, we push things out. But one of the things that really makes this community very fiscally responsible and viable is the fact that we don't mess with the reserve fund. What we do is we make sure that every single thing is in that reserve study, that we are accounting for it over a 30-year period, and we are religious about making sure that we stay at 40% at least of a fully funded balance so that we can have the money that we will need over time to keep our facilities maintained, vibrant, and improved. So that's kind of a long-winded way to put this, but what I want you to understand is how important this is. And that 300,000 didn't go away. In effect, it's just been pushed down the road.
Still stuck on what was the comment for March, April of next year's budget. So those funds, if it goes through the process, rec center comes back, governing board approves, blah, blah, blah. We could write a check for 300 grand in September.
If it's approved in a budget, yes. So, for example, March is probably when we'd have that, by that time, scoped out and probably a better idea of what we would want to spend on a project like that. At that point in time, we would assess funds in the budget. So
They're already sitting there.
Hold on just a moment. There's a chairperson sitting here in the center of the table.
Oh, my apologies.
Thank you. The March, April, that Cliff, just to interject, he was just giving us a projection, an idea. This is not a hard and fast timing, but because the funds have not been budgeted, we will have a better handle as a community on whether we've got the money available
Yeah.
sometime later in the fiscal year. I believe that's what you were
Yeah,
getting
so
to. There's no There's no timeline set in stone,
Okay.
right?
No.
If that helps.
Yeah,
Sorry to interrupt.
we've got 30 million in the budget now. If somebody came out and said, hey, we should buy that building over there, just because we have 30 million in the bank and the governing board says, yeah, we should do that, we don't have the funds approved in the budget to do that. So that was my point.
Right.
The funds aren't approved in the budget for that. Even though we have funds, they
Okay.
still have to be approved
Yeah,
and they have
yeah.
to be available
Yeah.
to spend it. That's
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Thank you.
you're welcome.
I hope that helped. I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just feeling lonely and neglected over here. Because I don't have anywhere near enough communication with, I'm just being silly and joking, but thank you very much. And thanks for the explanations. We don't have any questions online. Any other questions on that budget item from those of us here in attendance? Great. That'll wrap up new business, and we're on already to committee comments. I'm looking at the time here in the room because this may be a new record, but nonetheless, we have a lot of new business coming up at our next meeting, so that's okay. Ed, let's start with you in terms of any comments that you'd like to make.
I'm very process related. At the beginning of the start of our meetings, I was looking more at the trees instead of the forest, and I can see now that the way we did it really was systematic and timely, that we took the time to handle things in greater detail where we needed to, and then were able to compensate where things didn't need as much discussion. So I thought that was very great, and having sat through a lot of the meetings of budget, I really got a better appreciation of how it works. And I really think now as we discuss different items that have changed over the years, that it is a continuously improving process. And that's what I always look for, is what can we do better? We don't sit on our laurels that we're number 5 in the country. We're always looking at trying to do something better. So I really appreciate that. Thanks.
Thanks for the comments. Rick?
A couple things going through this budget process that kind of eats at my cross, let's just say. Not something that we do internally, but something how it's understood in the community. And that being is all the money that we've spent and budgeted is for the maintenance and operating of this community to keep up its standing as well as we possibly can. We're doing and allocating money to keep up the level of service and keep up what this community needs. And it also drives the investment of your property within the community. That's what drives it. And what do you call it? It makes sure that the community and your investment stays whole. Okay. Now, everybody in this community gets a bill from Maricopa County called the tax bill. Go in and look at those line item by line item and see which one of those line items directly impacts you and the community of Sun City West. And I'll bet 10 to 1, you use very little of those funds or those items to support you. And I bet you're paying a lot more money in property taxes than you do that goes to support Sun City West in your investment. So I understand people going through this process and questioning things and all that, but you got to do it and do it right. And I think that's what we've been doing to maintain and keep the value of your home and the community up to snuff. So.
Thank you, Rick. David?
Just wanted to say this is my first year, obviously, on the committee. I've learned a lot. Still have a lot more to learn, I'm sure, if I'm on it next year. But I think the process, what was important, I think, for the members of the community to see the process. The committee went through things in detail multiple times. Sometimes we came to a conclusion, and one of the things we asked was to extract that discussion on the on the software for the, not software, but the website update. It was done properly, and the governing board looked at it and felt there was a need to hold back on it. Whether that decision was that or had not, they decided to move forward. I think what's important, the process has been followed. And there was serious consideration given to that. So I concur with what the governing board did, but I also want to make sure I go down on record that I think the committee and the community has to realize that we're going to need some major investments in IT here in the future. And there's going to be some significant dollar figures needed for that, just like there is for the golf community. And that's to keep us up in trend and to actually use IT to make us more efficient. So while this has been delayed, and I support that, I think overall we're going to have to continue to look at what the needs are going to be for IT.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, so first of all, I really appreciate the people coming out and asking questions and investigating and reading as much as they can. That's really how you know what's going on, is by getting involved and checking it out. I have to tell you, the process is a little bit confusing. You know, I mean, for sitting here, being part of it, I understand it, but it's not as easy to follow if you just sit down once and attend one meeting. A good example is the word pullout. We should probably reconsider the wording for that, because pullout is not get rid of, right? Pullout is pull it away from the rest of the stuff and give it a little more discussion or a little bit more look. And, you know, the perfect example is the IT project, which I certainly voted to pull it out because I didn't know what a success was. I didn't know if we were to spend $300,000. At the end of the $300,000, I didn't know if we were successful or if we failed, because I didn't know exactly what we were, or closer, what we were targeting for. But, and I think the governing board did a good job because they thought the same way, right? They said, you know what, let's go get some more information and then come back later. And I know that our management team can come back later and ask for a certain amount of money, and if it could be approved, and they can move forward with the next step. But anyhow, I thank everyone in the room and everyone online and people that are asked questions, because that's how this thing works. And I see incredible transparency, so I'm real proud to be part of it.
Thanks, Chris. John?
Yeah, I just want to thank Mr. Leeds for his question. It was an excellent question, very, very well thoughtful and put together, and it was a good discussion. It's not an easy question to answer. It's not a simple answer. It's taken me all year to understand the reserve fund and the capital budget and how it works, and it's unique. And I'm very happy with what I've learned and satisfied that our community is in good hands and doing the process as well. But it was a very good question and good discussion, and keep asking those questions, and be happy to talk further if you want to have further conversations. I was going to say a lot what Mickey said, but the operating budget is a single year budget. It starts with the governing board providing high-level guidelines to the staff to say, go do this budget. It's a complicated puzzle. It's one of those puzzles where all the colors are the same in the puzzle, and it takes forever to do, and they spend a lot of time to do it. My understanding is they start with their expenses, and they determine, you know, staff wages and expenses and the entire nut that has to be covered in expenses, and then they go to their sources of revenue and figure out if they have enough and what they have to increase. And it's a variety of ways to get it, and it's complicated, and they did a very good job. And the Budget and Finance Committee went through all of those pieces to come with a conclusion that said we're comfortable with how the process worked. But part of that process is the governing board saying you need to make a 7.5% bottom line, because that's what we're going to contribute to our capital fund. Could it be 7? Could it be 8? It could be, but you just have to be prudent in the process on decisions, and you just have to, and that's what they've done, and they put guidelines, and the staff fulfilled those guidelines. Anyway, the process was long, and it was very thorough, and again, the Budget and Finance Committee felt in totality that it had been done very well. So I appreciate the question. The result of all of that process is what we have, which is a very healthy community. which some of our neighbors don't have. So some of those decisions may be off by 1% or something, but I hope people are comforted in the knowledge that that we are doing it because we've made guidelines that will help us be healthy in the future. So that's.
Thanks for the comments. And again, as a reminder, this is the kind of thing that open comments, and I'll come back and I made my comments at the start and throughout the governing board process. Remember that the governing board has not made any decisions nor recommendations vis-a-vis the budget. So if you're here and you're wondering, just so you understand, the Budget and Finance has completed our due diligence and made a recommendation, but now the governing board will do the same. Jim, you're next.
I echo everything that my fellow members have stated, but really a tip of the hat to you, Cliff. It's been a heck of a year, and I really appreciate everything that you've done to help explain and ramp us up. Thank you very much.
Welcome, Jim.
Mickey?
So I will keep it short. This has been a real, this has been I feel like it's been a gift to me to be on this committee. And honestly, the reason for that is the reason that I applied to be on the committee is that I have expertise in this area. I wanted to do something for the community, and I wanted to understand how the community was run. And I think that the way the community is run shows up in the budget. It shows up in the financial well-being of the community. And, you know, and I had heard lots of complaints. And so I thought, well, I'm gonna get an idea of how this runs myself. And I can tell you from my perspective and having looked into it in great detail, this place is run very, very well, and with a view to maximizing the economic outcomes in the community, which means they are thinking every day about how we maintain this community and how we keep our dues as low as we can. When I look at the dues in this community and I look at the amenities, the quality of the amenities, the number of amenities that we have here, I cannot belong to my local Y in Spokane, Washington for the amount of the dues I pay here. So I think that I understand people don't want their dues to go up, but there is an offsetting feeling. I don't want my dues too low so that my community suffers. And I can honestly say, when you look at the budget, and we did go through this in detail, when you look at our staffing below average in every area, which means what we get out of our staff, more than you would get from most. When we look at what we pay them, we actually get more from them, and we pay them less. We hear every single line item, every purchase is looked at. People go out for bid. They make sure that, are we getting the best price? I can say for certain that your dollars in this community are well looked after every single day. And that was longer than I meant to go, but sorry.
No worries. Committee has put in hundreds and thousands of hours, not only in meetings, but outside meetings, preparing for those meetings. So it's always great to hear your comments and questions as well as our residents. And speaking of which, we do have a resident that's made several comments online. Most of them are related to operations. So I just want to give our operations staff a little bit of a heads up. Some comments like these do not necessarily, I'm going to read them as they were stated. You could go online, and those who are watching online will see them as written. So I'm going to read them as stated. This is, the resident is Tina Munker, and she says first, this is a circle jerk. The membership fees need to be reduced. You are still taking money and putting it in the reserve fund to be used. You are not keeping the facilities maintained adequately. The pools are one example. You are wanting pie in the sky nonsense and not working to maintain what is currently here. Has anyone looked at the roof over the indoor pool at Palm Ridge? The last time we had rain like we had yesterday, the roof leaked. So I'm not personally responsible, nor have I looked at the roof in Palm Ridge. I don't know if any of our staff has and can address that. I didn't hear of any leaks. As for maintaining the facilities adequately, you are, and all the statements that you made, I believe you are welcome to your opinion, but I disagree for what it's worth. There is really no response to be made. As for taking money and putting it in the reserve fund, that is true. I don't have any other further response to make to that unless Cliff or Stephen Erno have anything to add. Your comments are welcome, Tina, and everyone. And again, what we do is I will read those out loud so we can all hear them. They are in our YouTube as well. So thanks for the comments. Are there any other questions or comments from our residents or attendees here today?
Bruce Lees, 135422. I would just like to challenge the Budget and Finance Committee with probably 120 years of experience in the financial services background, running companies, blah, 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 without knowing the particulars of each of your backgrounds, that we consider looking at, I'll step back a moment. We don't produce anything. We don't sell anything. We're a service industry as far as our employees go. They're servicing the member residents. So we don't produce a product, we don't sell a product. I'm curious as to, with the amount of money that we allocate in our budget, 63% to cover wages, salaries, and employee-related expenses is, in my opinion, excessive. I would encourage and recommend that the Budget and Finance Committee undertake a review to where efficiencies can be determined to reduce the cost. One efficiency I know that's going to occur is possibly next year, the 5-year window for our workman's comp claims, we should see some reduction in that because our rating under that system will probably change if we don't have another serious incidents warranting cost increases. So I just would like to see us able to possibly reduce the percentage of allocated money towards wages, tips, and salary to be less than 63% of the overall budget. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. Just to remind you, and you're aware of this, Mr. Lees, I know you're here at most of our meetings or attending online. We look at all of these things really closely. The workers' compensation, I believe we have 2 more calendar years for some of the adverse effects to fall off. We'll start to see some of that, we hope, assuming all goes well and our new safety manager continues to keep us going well and so forth as an organization. We hope to see that improve. Until we see that rating improve, we can't, in good conscience, change our budgeting until we know for sure that, or have a better indication that will improve. Fair enough? And we do look at everything really, really closely every year, not just this year. So thank you for the comments. It's something that the Budget and Finance Committee and the Governing Board as a whole takes very seriously, and we look at all of those things. This year, the Budget and Finance Committee has looked at all of those items and is comfortable with the funding that has been proposed. That's the recommendation to the Governing Board. Is there anything else you wanted to respond to there, Cliff?
Yeah, I would say you could look at the historical financial statements, and we're historically 60+% in terms of wages and benefits and employee costs. You're right, we don't produce anything. We are a service business. You could go to any service business model and see that wages and benefits by far is the largest portion of their budget. That's what a service business model looks like. because you don't have inventories, you don't have cost of sales, you're not producing, you have machinery and all these things where you have costs related to that. So labor is your highest expense. So that is a normal thing. That largest expense is also impacted by things that are out of our control, like minimum wage, which impacts the whole wage structure. So all those things have to be considered. What's going on in the insurance markets, things like that. But we are consistently looking at our positions. We're consistently looking at finding ways to do things more efficiently and do things better. You could look at our wages and expenses, our wages and our positions and say, well, we don't need that, or we don't have to have that service level, or those bunkers don't need to have new sand in them. You can look at that and say that. That's an opinion, but the services we provide and the service levels we provide are what our community has come to expect, and that's part of our budget goals. And then that's how we kind of put all that together. So appreciate the comments, but that is a normal thing, that in a service industry, your wages and benefits is by far your largest.
Cliff, we have one more question from, or statement from Tina Munker that it does relate to what you were just speaking about. So this just came in. Tina Munker states, wages and benefits should not exceed 40%. That is the industry standard. I'm not aware of that industry standard. Could you speak to that?
I'm not aware of that either.
It's still,
but
please, it's a member question, so I'm reading it as written. I just wanted to make sure that our residents have the opportunity to ask their questions and receive a reply.
Yeah, and you can go back in history and you can consistently see, if you look at the minimum wage increase and compare that to cost of living, for example, or inflation rate. In Arizona minimum wage, when I started working out here in 2007, Arizona minimum wage, I think, was $8.05, and we're at $14.70 right now. So that impacts all wages.
It does, especially here where we do have quite a dependency on hourly waged employees. So thanks for that, and thanks for the comments. Thanks also for your patience, for those of you here in the room. So I have a couple of quick comments here at as we wrap up. I do, again, want to remind everyone about the committee application deadline that's coming up. It's May 15th. Please consider serving the community. Oh, we do have our general manager has stepped to the microphone to make a response, so I'll hold further comment. Stephen?
I apologize. I just wanted to follow up. I checked with staff, and we are aware of the leak at Palm Ridge, and staff is taking care of it. We are waiting for the vendor. So just like in any personal life, sometimes you can't get a vendor out right away to deal with an issue at your house or whatever. It's the same situation here. We are working towards resolution with that, but we are waiting on a vendor. So.
Thank you. That was a real-time update. So there was a leak, and it's being evaluated. That was appreciate the update. So back to the comments, and again, I hope that answers the question for you. So as for my comments, again, please serve. I hope you'll consider serving the community. Not just our current budget and finance, but anyone who would want to serve on this committee or any of our standing committees or special committees. Please fill out the application. We'd love to consider that. A couple of quick notes as well. Generally, at each of our quarterly at budget and finance meetings, we have our investment management firm, Cap Trust, will come in and give a quarterly update to the budget and finance committee as to how our funds are responding, gives us a look forward and so forth. We're making a slight tweak to that process in this month. We invite not only this committee, but everybody here to attend the governing board workshop on Friday, where Cap Trust will make the presentation this time. We're in a very volatile period of economic change, and we felt that it would be time well spent to have that presented to the governing board directly. So we will attend there and listen and ask questions. We, the Budget and Finance Committee, and myself, and the entire governing board. So again, if you're looking for that for this current quarter, please join us on Friday morning. We'll be considering that, and the agenda also includes our proposed policy change for FY12. Cap Trust will be there to answer questions on that as well. Just a couple of quick notes. And I can't thank the Budget and Finance Committee enough, and I can't remind you adequately enough that we're not done. So we do still have a few more meetings left to go because the operating budget has not been decided upon yet by the governing board. Once that vote is taken, and by our bylaws, our association bylaws require the governing board to make that vote and decision by the end of this calendar month, by the end of May. So once we've made that vote at the governing board, then Budget and Finance can start discussing wrapping up our year. We expect that will be in early June. That being said, I don't see any other comments online, none others here in the room. So I remind you that our next Budget and Finance Committee meeting will be on May 20th, right here in the lecture hall at 9 a.m. We'll have a packed agenda, so we look forward to seeing you, and bring some friends with you. And that will wrap us up today. We adjourn at 10:01 a.m. Thank you.